I think we're ready to start. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. We're now 5 hours into this historic UN Leader Summit. That's still just the beginning. As you know, we have something like 21 hours more to go. Great content across all time zones. For now and for the next hour, I'm really pleased to welcome everyone to what is now one of the first exciting breakout sessions in the summit, titled Setting Bold Targets to Scale Impact on the Global Goals. My name is Ole Hansen. I'm Chief of Global Operations with the UN Global Compact, and I have the pleasure of moderating this great panel with some wonderful panelists representing companies that have already themselves set some ambitious goals and targets for their companies in different areas. Before I introduce the panelists, and hopefully in the meantime we get the last panelist to join, there are some technical difficulties, but that gives me then the opportunity in the meantime, also for those of you who haven't watched the sessions earlier today in the beginning of the summit on SDG Ambition, I can just give you a quick highlight what it's all about. It's an initiative called SDG Ambition. It was launched by the UN Secretary General in January this year around the World Economic Forum. It was before, of course, most of us knew at least that there was a pandemic about to change many of our lives in a very, very significant way. But even before the pandemic, the situation was unfortunately so that we were not on track. We were far from on track, actually, to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Even if we've seen many countries, many governments, and not least many companies have made the SDGs a priority. Despite all of that, we still have hundreds of millions of people living in extreme poverty. We're on a trajectory towards a temperature rise of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. We have, more than 200 years, according to a study launched also at the World Economic Forum, to close the economic gender gap. And as we see now all too clearly, we also have widespread racism all over the world. So now, of course, with the ongoing pandemic and with the devastating socioeconomic impacts that pandemic will be having, realizing the Sustainable Development Goals have only become even more challenging. So this makes it really, really clear that we need a much higher level of ambition on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, looking at the business sector, at the private sector, at companies around the world, and that's of course what we do at the UN Global Compact, most importantly. Raising ambition means at least two things. One, we need many more companies to align themselves with the level of ambition of the SDGs themselves. And we need companies to deepen integration of sustainability across their businesses and into performance management systems as well. So earlier today, in the beginning of the summit, Lisa Kingo and Julie Sweet launched on behalf of the UN Global Compact, Accenture, and SAP a set of proposed SGG Business Benchmarks. And those are the ones you see on the screen here. So just before we get the panel started, I wanted to make sure that everybody see what those proposed benchmarks look like. Each of them is really meant to help translate the level of ambition of the Sustainable Development Goals into really clear lines in the sand, you can say, into the level of ambition that each and every company ought to align with in terms of their own goals and their own targets. So we're putting them out there with our partners and really hopefully creating a lot of action in the business community, asking companies to set their own goals and targets aligned with those benchmarks, aligned with that level of ambition that is needed. So this really means that we're asking companies, as we are already seeing leading companies doing, we're asking companies to set goals and targets not based on what they believe currently is possible, or not based on what they see their competitors doing, but really set the level of ambition based on what is required for the world to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. So to discuss this and many more things, we have an exciting panel, as I said. We have 3 of 4 panelists online. We have a 4th panelist still trying with some technical difficulties, but hopefully that'll be solved as we get started. But a wonderful panel for this session features Anne Rosenberg, who's Senior Vice President for UN Partnerships at SAP, and one of our great partners and pioneers and champions very early on for SDG Ambition. Then we have Florence Bülte, who's the Head of Sustainable Engagement at Chalhoub Group. And then we have Vance Marola, who's the Worldwide Director of Sustainability at Colgate-Palmolive. And then, hopefully very soon, we'll have Eric Suberon, who's the Vice President of Nature and Water Cycle at Danone. Very much hoping that Eric will join us very soon. But we'll get started with the rest of the panel, and even if Eric shouldn't join us, we'll have a wonderful conversation. We really aim for this session to get as practical as possible, learning from some of the leaders in not just setting ambitious targets, but really also driving change within companies and delivering on those targets. And feel free, of course, to share as many insights from your companies and from your own experiences in driving change. Also, any challenges or pitfalls that you think others should know about. I'd like to remind all of our participants that we will, towards the end of the session, aim to take as many questions as we can from the audience. So feel free, to start anytime posting questions in the chat. There are 2 options, so make sure that you ask your question in the chat that is really for the session, not for the broader event. That way we make sure that we see the questions that you have. Great. So I'd love to start with you, Anne, being part of this journey for many months already. Could you, of course, introduce yourself and what this whole initiative means to SAP, and maybe talk a little bit as way of introduction of how SAP is also helping companies set and track sustainability goals?
Thank you so much, Ole. And first of all, a big congratulations to UN Global Compact on the 20 years anniversary. SAP is very excited about this cooperation with UN Global Compact. We have been working with UN Global Compact for many, many years. And at the same time, we have also seen how companies using SAP software, whatever we talk about, supply chain or procurement systems or any kind of business process within companies across 25 industries. You've seen how companies are becoming more and more sustainable and the way they're applying SAP software. And as Lisa said at the beginning of today, after the High Political Forum last summer, we saw that even though many companies have been signing up to UN Global Compact and many companies have a sustainable strategy, it's still very difficult to implement the SDGs into your operation model and how you run your businesses. When we talk about operation model, we talk about going into your business processes and to the online enterprise architecture. And that's why the whole idea came up around, why don't we create the SDG Ambition? So when you run a digital transformation, you make sure you bring the SDGs in center of what you're doing. So SAP's commitment is very, very big. 77% of the world's business transactions are supported by SAP systems. And of course, we want to see that we support them in a way that we support companies in be responsible businesses. So that's really where the motivation comes from. And of course, we as a company ourselves is also on a very strong sustainable journey at the same time, and are part of many of the programs that UN Global Compact is driving.
Great, thank you, Anne, and again, thank you for a great partnership with SAP so far. Obviously, just getting started. I'd love to turn now to Florence from Chalhoub Group, great champion of the Global Compact across the Middle East, and also we're very proud to have your CEO, Patrick Chalhoub, on the board of the Global Compact. Could you also, of course, introduce yourself and maybe talk, as a way of introduction, maybe give one practical example of what goal setting looks like for Chalhoub?
Yeah, thank you, Olen. Thank you. I'm really happy to be part of this panel. So just to set a bit of background, as you said, Chalhoub Group is a family-owned business. We are a member of the UNGC since 2014. We are a retailer and distributors of luxury brands in the Middle East. We operate over 14 countries and employ over 11,000 people. So I'm personally in charge of driving the sustainability strategy of the group. So I had prepared more than one example, but the sustainability target I would like to illustrate with you today is our zero waste to landfill and our 100% results recovery objectives. Both of them are aligned with the SDG Ambition business benchmark, and obviously they are material and relevant for our industry. So the way we did it, we set these targets for our three main areas of operations, which are our warehouses, our offices, and our stores, knowing that we have over 700 stores in the Middle East. So we started by studying the nature, the pattern of waste. We worked upstream, downstream to prevent the generation of waste, optimize the waste management. And for the sake of an example, I'd like to share at least three with you. So 1 year ago, we started to phase out single-use plastic across all our operations, finding alternatives to plastic working closely with our procurement team. We installed water filtration system. As I can say, as of today, we managed to phase out 70% of our single-use plastic. Second initiative we took was we shifted to digital filing in all our operation again. Installation of smart printers, which allowed us to reduce our consumption of paper by 50% in 2 years. And we are currently reviewing and auditing all our recycling tools with the aim of recycling 100% of our waste. And in our warehouses, for example, they've already achieved 90% of the recycling rate. So obviously, all these measures have got an impact on our organization. And I would say the first one is financial, because even if these measures require some investment upfront, it definitely has a positive return on investment down the line, mid-term or long-term. The second positive impact we saw was an increased employee engagement. Nowadays, team members really want to work for a group which cares about the environment and which actually walking the talk. And a third impact would be definitely it allowed us to build the trust with our stakeholders, because in the same way, our partners want to make business with a group which is adopting some responsible business. So yes, it's a journey. There's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of challenges to be learned. So in terms of pitfall, the one I wanted to highlight was right at the beginning when we set the target, to make sure that these targets are measurable, because obviously what's not measurable cannot be monitored and it cannot be managed. In terms of lesson learned, there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but definitely I would say the importance of partnerships. So not only to tap into capabilities or innovation that we may not have, but really to make sure that we achieve our goals. So for example, for us as a retailer, we have to work very closely with the mall operators to make sure that the procedures are aligned in order to reach our goals. So it's a journey, and I would say business need to be able to take some corrective initiatives and be follow up what's happening in their ecosystem. So if we take the example of the COVID-19, our back office team had to work from home, and that's something that we decided to keep on moving forward. So obviously we will have to review the way we operate our back office, review maybe the office space, and reset our targets maybe for more challenging one. In the same way, it boosted our e-commerce. So the way we were doing business has evolved as well. So, but from an environmental point of view, it has generated another type of waste which we'll have to manage and tackle if you want to achieve the targets we had set. And the last thought I would like to share with you is that definitely we all have a responsibility in making sure that these goals are achieved. So 2 years ago, we created a scorecard based on the UNGC 10 principles that we shared with our partners. We held some awareness sessions since to support our integrate the 10 principles in their business strategy. And this is really crucial for us because when we consider, for example, the goal of leaving no one behind, we definitely all have a role to play, to reduce inequalities, eliminate all forms of discrimination, and provide equal opportunities.
Great, thank you so much, Florence. Also for really talking about these great ambitions in a very practical way, some of the challenges. That's exactly what we want to do here. I'm so happy we have our last panelist also joined now. I think there were some technical issues, but Eric Souperon, Vice President, Nature and Water Cycle at Danone.
Hello, everyone.
Great. So we're still doing a round of introductions, and we'll get to you in a second. I'll turn to Vance first. And maybe simply the same question as you introduce yourself. Could you also talk, about, at least one practical example of what goal setting looks like in your company?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Oksole. Thanks for having us participate today. It's very exciting. I've been listening in all morning and really great stuff. So, Vance Morrell, a Colgate-Palmolive company. We're headquartered in New York City since 1806. So we've been around a long time. We're very involved with UN Global Compact. We're a lead company, which is we're really proud of. I think we're one of only 3 US-based companies that are on the lead list. So we're very active and we really value the work we do with the Global Compact. So thanks for that. In terms of today, I'm going to talk a little bit later, I think, more about this idea of raising ambitions and positivity and taking that next step. So we'll cover that when we talk about our new strategy. So as it happens, we are just finishing up our new 2025 sustainability strategy, which is a great time to be having these discussions, and I'll go through details of that later. So we really are moving ahead. When I look at the 10 ambitions on the SDG list that was just published, I mean, they're very aligned with the ambitions and targets that we're setting. I guess one example I'd give, and I was actually, Florence stole mine, Florence. I was going to talk about zero waste because it's such a unique program that we have. I'll say 2 words about it and then I'll pivot to a different one because I don't want to be repetitive. But the zero waste in our own operation. So our goal is to be have all of our facilities, our factories, our offices, our technology centers, and warehouses that we own to be zero waste by 2025, and so that's a pretty big hill to climb for us, but we've made really great progress. So we're using the True Zero Waste certification system from the U.S. Green Building Council. We think it's a great way to measure and get people involved. I think so far we have 17 factories in 9 countries on 4 continents working on that. So that's a great example of alignment with when you look at the list of 10. But I guess since I won't go into too much detail on that, the one that is the big and obvious one that everyone talks about is climate. And so Colgate has had a science-based target since 2017. and we've achieved that science-based target, and now we're in the application process for a new science-based target. And this one is very much aligned with the 1.5 degrees business, the business ambition. And so with that, it's not just scope 1 and scope 2, of course, but it's also really pushing us to involve our suppliers in a different way. And our procurement has really been really supportive on that. So I think that's a big step change for us, is really getting our suppliers more involved. We've been working with consumers using the products for a long time, but now really looking upstream to suppliers. So I think that's really important. And we've added on to that that ambition also to be 100% renewable energy by 2030 and net zero in operations by 2040. So I think for climate, that's another great example on your SDG list of where people can really lean in and make a difference. And so I'll be going into more of this, about how we did target setting, if you're interested in that, and how we use the SDGs actually in some of the processes to develop our own ambition.
Great, yeah, would love to hear more about that a bit later. I'd say it's absolutely not a problem that you also talk about zero waste. I mean, having two companies illustrate ambitions in that area, I mean, is wonderful, and obviously hopefully paves the way for many, many more. We need thousands of companies to really set so ambitious targets across the board. But thanks very much. We'll turn to our last panelist for some introductory remarks. So Eric, representing Danone, also you have set goals and targets on sustainability for a number of years, clearly also very ambitious one on climate change, aligned with the science-based targets, aligned with the 1.5. We like to welcome you to introduce yourself, and maybe as you do so, also talk about one practical example of setting such an ambitious goal within Danone.
Thank you very much. And first of all, a happy anniversary to the Leader Summit. I think it's amazing to think that it's a 20th anniversary. So congratulations to all. We definitely need your leadership, and we need basically all together to roll up our sleeves wherever we are to make sure the 10 years in front of us can really drive the change that we need for the world. And I'm very happy to be with you today. So my name is Eric. I'm in charge of sustainability for Danone. It's a French global food company. We are lucky to be active in 3 different types of products. One is what we call dairy and plant-based product that we put together on the same division. Another type of product which are specialized nutrition for medical nutrition and kids nutrition, and a third business for us is in water. So I'm saying that because by definition, I would say that the SDG framework, first of all, has been a very strong inspiration for us to shape basically what we call our company goals. We have developed a matrix of 9 company goals that is directly inspired from the SDG network. And that is currently driving basically the strategic agenda of our divisions. I used to be a general manager in Danone, handling a business, and every year I was receiving a cadrage letter, a bit old-fashioned maybe, but where I had the 9 company goals driven from the SDG with clear KPIs, as you were mentioning. And part of my mission as a general manager in the company was to deliver my economic agenda equation, but also my 9 company goals. And in these company goals, you will find, I would say, elements linked to climate change, to nature protection, to inclusivity, that basically have been shaped all over the years. And this is what is currently our framework for action. So that's I think for us very important to have basically this type of framework that many of the companies around the table today are also leading. First, to have a language that is common to get an agenda moving, and I think that's very important. And I think this is extremely important when you go into the very detail. You ask me for a very concrete example, but when you look at, for instance, a food company like Danone, by definition, 2/3 of our footprint is agriculture. So you need to be able to analyze in detail what is your potential impact and lever for action. Because as a company, you need to be able to identify what is really meaningful for your business as a sustainability topic, and where you can have an impact. And the intersection of both is really where you need to focus your so for us in Danone, agriculture, for instance, was one of the big elephants in the room, a big element of our strategy, because this is pulling a lot of the transformation where, as a company, we can be relevant. So this is why, for instance, we started to work on a framework linked to soil sequestration, where we believe there is a capacity to double down a lot of positive effect on climate, on water protection, but also on inclusivity. If you make basically your production on resilient regenerative agricultural landscape more sustainable. I was before the confinement in Kenya myself last year, and just to give you an example, we have about 50,000 farmers in some of the areas there, where working with them, we've been able, through regenerative agricultural practices, not only to make them climate resilient, but also to increase the time span at which the farmers can wait for the next rain to come. So to make them more resilient to the change of drought by 6 to 8 weeks. So it makes all the difference for some of our farmers there. So that's practical example where deriving from SDGs objective, making them relevant to your business. And I think as sustainability professional, this is what is important in the company, is really this translation to something that is relevant, and to make them programs that can be activated. So that's how I see my job, and how I can relate to basically the SDG framework.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and thanks to everyone for such a great beginning of this panel. Clearly, we've invited the right experts on this topic. For those who joined a little bit later, we're here in the session talking about SDG Ambition and talking about setting bold targets to scale impact on the global goals. Want to turn it back to you, Anne, from SAP and the partner on SDG Ambition from the beginning. Now we've heard some of our companies giving early examples here of how and why. But since you're part of the initiative, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about why you also from the business perspective see a need to raise the ambitions even higher, and maybe talk a little bit to those business benchmarks that we put out today. I can show them again here on the screen as you speak.
Thank you so much, Ole. And thanks to Vanessa and Florence and Eric. It's great to hear how you really are putting the SDG into the core of how you run your businesses. So again, back to Ole's question. So when we came together to create SDG Ambition, and there's kind of 3 documents, and one of them was the first one that came out. This one here was really around the framework. And it's interesting when you think about the framework, because when you have now the 10 first benchmark, and it is the 10 first, there will be more coming. And when you read the document that was published today, there will also be industry specific, and there will be additional benchmark coming out. But the thing about benchmark and the way to run your business, you really need to go in, and this is what the All SDG Implementation Framework talks about. You need to go into your strategy and governance. You need to go into your entire operational of your company, and you need to go into stakeholder engagement. And this is here, and that SAP, because we are a technology company, we go in and look at business processes, which are called the backbone of the company, and the business processes is then supported by the underlying enterprise architecture. And I think what we have done now, which is very exciting, which is the 3rd document that is coming out, is not yet out, but it's also part of the document that came out today, what to expect, is that we really go from saying, here is a framework for how you need to think when you want to be a resilient, sustainable business. And it goes across your entire line of business. This is what I love what you talked about, Eric. You said you didn't even come from the world of sustainability, but you saw the logic, and then you saw that it needs to become mainstream into your business going forward. And that's the whole idea that when a company sign up to UN Global Compact, which is done by the CEO, then he or she needs to go into the all the line of businesses and say, now we need to incorporate into the way we do business in our company. That means into the business process, that means into the underlying enterprise architecture. And then with the ambitions that you then have, that you sign up to, you then take those KPI and those targets, and then you cascade it into the underlying landscape. And you collect the data when you do the measurement. But then you kind of say, but are you sure that those data is available? And that is what we now are mapping out by going from the business process layer down to the underlying enterprise architecture. Some of the data is available because we don't collect all the data today. There will be a data set that is not collected to be able to measure up against the benchmark. But that also has to do with that we need to change the way we do business, the way we collect the data going forward. So it's a really good reading when you read the document that was allowed today, which is available on your Global Compact site, to read about those ambitions in details. And again, you might think, but this is that the 10 ones, but there will be more coming, and Ole will also talk about this. We really ask companies out there to come with your input, to come with your validation, also input to industry-specific benchmark are you also looking for. But there's no doubt about it going forward. It cannot just be an add-on to do good. It needs to be the core of the way you operate your business, that you put the benchmark in the center of that. Thanks, Ole. Back to you.
Thanks, Anne. Very well said, and indeed great to share a little bit more about kind of the hopefully very practical nature of the initiative itself. Florence, you already talked about some of the benefits you've seen, for example, from the goal you set on zero waste. But I wanted to stay on that just for a little bit and see if you could also help other companies who are joining today understand why do you think it's necessary and helpful for companies to really raise their ambitions on the SDGs? Also, of course, looking at some of the many challenges that we see the world facing today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, a huge motivation behind setting these sustainability goals is that it's really providing a platform to build trust with our stakeholders. And I guess in that context, the saying doing well by doing good still prevails. And it also enables company to align with the 10 principles and the SDGs. Hence, it assures business longevity for their activities, which is crucial. And this is what we are looking for. Now, I mean, I would say it's especially important for companies to set sustainability goals now during this time of crisis, because it will allow them to and allow us to mitigate the negative impact this crisis had on our business. And I would even say failing to set these ambitions could potentially expose companies to more hardship. So if I take the example I have given previously, when we took the decision around keeping flexible working method and working from home, this will have two major positive impacts on our organization. The first one is that it's on our staff well-being, because it will create a more sustainable and comfortable way of working. The second big impact will definitely be on the environment, because it will help us reach our target set for our carbon footprint. We have already managed to reduce our emissions by Q2, and this kind of decision will allow us to reduce it further and reach our target.
Great. Back over to you, Vance. You said before when you shared that first example, you said that you've already used the SDGs even before these benchmarks came out. You've used the SDGs also to inform not just where you set goals, but also, if I understood you correctly, kind of how ambitious you go within Colgate Palmolive. Could you talk a little bit more about how you kind of define internally how ambitious you want to set those goals and targets, And then I wanted to build into it also a question that came from the audience here. If you could at the same time also share, what were some of the challenges you experienced when setting ambitious sustainability targets, and also what did you do when you were experiencing, maybe if you were, conflicting priorities. So a little bit about how you come to the level of ambition you do, how the SDGs play in, but also some of the challenges in defining that internally.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. It's a great question. I like what Anne said about practicality. All of this stuff talk about goals. We know what we need to do. Science is telling us what we need to do, but a practical solution to get people to actually act, that is not so easy. And I think that's what the Ambition initiative is about, right? It's that bridge over to what we know we need to do, and then actually, how do you actually figure this out? So I'll share with you how at Colgate-Palmolive we recently went through that process, and it took the better part of a year. I'll be honest with you, it is a challenge if you wanted to really do it right. So last year we started, our 2020 strategy was kind of coming to an end, and we really wanted to raise it, setting sustainability goals and strategies since 2003. So we've done this many times. But I'd say, like many companies, is somewhat very incremental. And so just
Okay. I think Vance, we're having some difficulties. There's some delay on your line right now. Let me try and move it over to you, Eric, and then hopefully we will come back to Vance in just a minute. But I guess essentially the same kind of questions for you. Then you talked also about how you define your priorities, looking both at the SDGs, but obviously also at business priorities. But could you talk specifically then also to how you figure out internally what level of ambition to aim for? What are kind of the challenges in setting very ambitious targets, but also where do you see the benefits when you really stretch the organization and set very, very, very bold targets?
Right. I think I think we have to make a choice between. I think there are two dimensions in your question. The first one is when you are a food company, by definition, you can basically develop a business model that is based on regenerative resources. So the decision you have to make, and it's not an easy one, is do you want basically that your resources are regenerated, and are you organizing yourself that your business model guarantee their regeneration, right? So, as a matter of fact, it is clear, and this is what we have explained many times, the seafood system that has been created after the Green Revolution has linearized the food production to a point that the resources have been commoditized, and we have destroyed the capacity of the system to regenerate. So and to an extent that sometimes is even linking to absurdity, where we have disconnected consumers. And when I say we, is the industry, so we have been part of this. So we have to be very clear on that. So we have a responsibility to shape a system differently and to prove that the system can work differently. And I think it is very important, because this is where you can make a very strategic decision as a company to decide if you want to adapt your business model. And I think this is, in a way, an entrepreneurial journey. This is, for instance, why we have decided, and we are proposing this month to our shareholders, to change the article of association of our company to the equivalent in France of a benefit corporation, because we want to put very clear criteria in front of basically our shareholders, that the objective of Danone is both economic, social, and environmental. So that's one example of how you adjust very ambitious goals. And in that, you need to move, and I think that's something that for me as a sustainability professional now, because I'm happy to be part of this community, is to move from KPIs of objective to KPI of impact. I think companies are never better than when they do what they are constructed for, which is delivering something that has an impact. So the importance is to have a positive impact, right? So I don't think that companies should be part of the political discussion, but towards a goal and an impact, you know. So that's exactly where, for instance, we are adjusting our supply chain, we are transforming basically our product portfolio, we are managing, increasing the resiliency of against some of our supply chain, because this is what we know. And again, that's the junction between what is relevant for a business and where a company can have an impact. There are many areas in my everyday job where I always ask my team, but can we really, as Danone, have an impact on this issue? You know, so where can you invest your resource that by definition are scarce in a corporation? And I think that's where we have to make this critical assessment. And that's I think sometimes on a very business standpoint, what is very interesting, I find interesting in this journey, and we've done, for instance, many things with SAP at the very beginning on climate analysis. What is interesting is at the end, it forces you to know better your supply chain, to know better your business. So it's business related, because you know how you structure your business, you know how you structure your supply chain better, and that's a huge advantage for companies who go through that journey. Again, on the perspective of having an impact. And so there is, and I think there is an exercise that we could probably do more frequently collectively than. If I tell you, we have committed Danone to reduce our intensity per kilos of milk by 30% by 2030. It's a very bold objective, by the way. But what does that tell you concretely? It's probably better and more tangible if I explain you that we're having a positive impact on the livelihood of 58,000 farmers and families we are working with every day. That we are contributing to restore a certain X thousands of millions of hectares. Because this is really where you connect your agenda with the people's agenda. And I think that's a leapfrog we need to do. And my last word on your question is, I think we are now in a momentum where I think we cannot continue to be whistleblowers only. We have now to provide solutions, because the world is looking for solution today. Our consumers are looking for solution. If we don't bring them solution, they will choose different brands. So this is very important. And through our brands, they want to have an impact. And I think that's really one of the big shifts that we're seeing right now. So it's very demanding, but it's also a very force for traction. I don't know if my colleagues would share that point of view, but that's also a very positive wave on which we can surf.
Very, very well words, and very ambitious indeed. See, Vance, we've lost you a couple of times now. We want to make the best of you being back here, because you got interrupted before by this same technology that we're praising otherwise. But you were in the middle of an interesting account of how you set ambitious, how you define that, how the SDGs help, and what some of the challenges are. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Elliot, I've dropped several times, so let's hang on. Hopefully, I can get the story across. Yeah. So I was just beginning to tell you how we were setting new ambitions for 2025 and the process that we used. And so we really. This time we convened a multi-stakeholder team, so to speak, of subject matter experts. So procurement, packaging, marketing, manufacturing, finance, HR, technology, corp comm, everybody together. put in the past, but this was a real team. And collectively, then we challenged everybody to think about sustainability in a new way for the first time. So, you know, there used to be procurement would work on the sourcing strategy and packaging work on the package. We did this all together collectively, which is really different and very effective, and got all kinds of different inputs. So that was different. And then rather than talking about, when we had everyone together, just incremental goals, we challenged people to think about what's the purpose of the sustainability goal as you as a subject matter expert. Is it just to get 10% better? Or is it to actually have sustainable sourcing in the end? Is it about less energy, or is it about stopping climate change? And those, so thinking at a higher level for people who are not day in and day out like people like us who just really do sustainability, they're doing their work and they care about sustainability. So work was really interesting and that worked. And then we asked them to set targets, right? And not just use the normal lens of incrementality, but we asked them to look through 3 lenses. One was, if you set this target for 2025 and we arrive then, what impact would you have had? Not just, I'm going to set percent and
oh no. Oh.
to achieve. I hope I'm not dropping out here, but I may be on the plate.
We have you back now. Please continue. Yeah.
Oh, can you still hear me? Ole?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm not seeing my face spin around. I'll go quickly. And then, so that was the other lens was actually science. And then the third one was business, was growth. Like, we are a business, and if you really believe that you can grow, that sustainability helps a business grow, and it's the right thing to do for business, that we should look through the lens of growth as well. And so all those together had us seeing these goals in a much different way and achieving impact. And so the idea of moving from neutral to positive on target setting, for example, not just the greenhouse gas of 25%, but what a science-based target tells us to do. And so we did that with all the SMEs, and that really pushed them to make sort of measurable targets that we could use for progress tracking and also reporting. And I like the idea of practicality, like Anne was saying, and I love this expression I've been using lately is, and I think Eric was getting this, having everything built in, not bolted on. And I think traditionally, when we, decades ago when we started this, it was just, okay, here's our goals for business, and let's just bolt on a sustainability. Well, now we're building them into the actual functions and having ownership. And I think, like anything else in business, like you were saying, that's what drives results. If you have a goal, companies know how to get results. Mm-hmm. So I got through it without getting cut off.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm happy we had you back for that. That's a powerful way to talk about the importance of goal setting. And there are a few questions that have come in, a couple I think that are specifically also for you at SAP. So maybe we can try and talk to them. I guess one question is, how does SAP use your B2B focus to make clients aware of and ready to address the Sustainable Development Goals? There was a question, looking at that specifically for small business impact. What are kind of the practical solutions there? Yeah, I think those are 2 good questions, very practical as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ole. So I think first of all, SAP ensured that our software can go in and support a sustainable strategy at our clients. And that's also the reason why it is such an exciting work to do the UN, this SDG Ambition that we do the UN Global Compact and Essentia, because we are going in and we are going to map up the enterprise architecture of SAP software up to the business process and up to the ambition. That's what the third guide is, that is not yet coming out, but coming out a little later this year. And then just to say one more thing about this, what Venice also talked about is that nobody should feel this is overwhelming what we're bringing here to the table. It's more or less to say all of us have been involved in creating strategies and business model and running businesses and implementing technology, depending on what kind of role you have. What this really is just about is that when we go in and we define a business process, or we define a technology solution, or we define a new way to go to market, we just put the whole thing about purpose into that decision making around it, just like we have done for years with optimization and efficiency gain and innovation. We just need to make sure that purpose is put into center of what we're doing. And for the small businesses, I think that whatever you're a small business, whatever you're a big business, whatever you're a startup, we are all in it together, that we need to make sure that what we build needs to be purpose-driven. It's just part of the nature of the way we run businesses going forward. And what we do at SAP, of course, we have a huge ecosystem. So we have our internal entrepreneurship program like SAP.io, the 1 Billion Life, where we work a lot with purpose ideations. We work a lot with our partners and purpose solutions. So we really work in a way that we with our entire ecosystem, are focusing on technology solutions that support processes that support a resilient business and a purposeful business. But again, the last point I want to say, don't be overwhelmed with SDG ambition. It's just, that will be, I believe we will get into a world when you have a meeting with your team, or you're starting a new project with technology and business process and so on, because you just say, we do the SDG ambition way going forward. So it's just becoming a normality, the way you do things. That's how I do with the SDG ambition. What you Ole?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anja. That's great. We're unfortunately, soon running out of time, but I wanted to get another question in for each of the rest of the three of you. Starting with you, Eric, there was a question also from the audience around how has COVID-19 affected your sustainability targets, and maybe I could add, what do you see as the prospects for COVID-19, and also, of course, the economic recession, the social difficulties? How do you see that impacting the likelihood that we get, more and more companies to set ambitious goals, but of course also starting with how it's impacted at you at Danone?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's too early to say how deep this crisis is going to impact us. So I think what is very clear on this crisis, first of all, is that we can see the situation right now in Latin America. I think we need to demonstrate a lot of solidarity to the regions now that are heavily impacted. This is, for instance, why I have the privilege to lead also the Danone Ecosystem Fund, and we have our Danone board has reinvested 20 million euros to support basically the project we have in this region and the current situation. So I think it's a bit early right now because doing very much organically. But there are a few things that I can mention. First of all, I think there is clearly a lot of I would say perception from people that the world is more and more interconnected, and therefore that something happening in China will impact basically 3.5 billion people in their everyday life. And I think these interconnections, of course, calls for basically the capacity to act collectively and collaboratively. I think this is one thing, which is, by the way, very much contradicted also by some reflex of nationalism right now. So there is a lot of basically antinomic movement right now that we are seeing. And I think this is creating a fragmentation of the needs, very much. This is where I want to come, and this is complexifying, by the way, the work of companies that are multinational companies, because there is not a single reality right now. So this was not the case before. This is even less the case right now. So that calls, at least for food, for much more localization. I think this is very, very important. An increasing de-averaging of the solutions you are bringing to the consumers, and this is extremely important because they need to be part of the solution. So that's one thing. And I don't want to be too long, but I think the second thing that clearly for us is very important is that we will need different solutions to make sure that we build inclusive supply chain. I think this is extremely important. The inclusivity part will become extremely important, facing the massive challenge of unemployment that will be in front of us in many countries. So we need to make sure that our supply chains can drive inclusivity. So that's a big challenge. I think the SDGs are there also to guide us on that front. But definitely, that's never been as important, because we see in food that very often this type of economic crises are increasing inequalities, but also inequalities of diets, by the way. People tend to eat not as good as they used to do before, so we have a role to play, again, to bring inclusive supply chain, not only on hiring people, but also on continuing to bring affordable solution to the people. So that's how it's basically affecting us, with a lot of consequences on our product mix, on the type of distribution channels that we need to invent moving forward. So a big question, sorry, in 3 minutes, but definitely the consequences are there. And again, this is not a slowdown of our sustainability agenda. I think it's revisiting it, making them extremely relevant, and de-average the conversation for local solution. I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's very, very complicated, and I'm sure for other businesses and in other industries, of course, it looks even different from that, of course. Again, we're running out of time, but I wanted to hear one last time from Vance and also from Florence. For you, Vance, there was a question that I guess is also a big question, but it's a question coming in about how setting ambitious, bold targets, does that impact your company's business model? Do you create a new business model? Can you speak a little bit to that? Maybe you also have some comments on the COVID-19 and how you're right now looking at your sustainability goals in that light. Two big questions, I know, in just a minute or two for you to answer.
Lawrence, do you want to go?
So that was for you, Vance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was for Florence as well. So yeah. So I don't. The quick answer. The first on COVID, I think it's a very interesting point. Consumer products company. How will consumers react to this? There's economic issues, but then there's access issues and relevancy as well. So we actually done a pretty good analysis, a deep analysis on this. It's very pertinent to us. So as our operations continue to go, we make essential goods, and we've continued to enable operate around the world with the great work of our people around the world, and doing it safely, which is terrific. But then the actual relevancy of the products and what will change, and the initial reaction from people is, oh, COVID's here, habits are changing, will sustainability be pushed off to the side by the average consumer? And nobody knows for sure, but the implications and the analysis that we've done so far is that we don't. In most cases, that's not the case. And in fact, there are accelerants. I think some things like seeing how collective behaviors, and individual behaviors can change the climate in such a short amount of time. Now it's done in a terrible way, yes, but could that be replicated and show people, hey, maybe if we do collective action, we could actually fix something? So there could be positives on the climate. We don't have a lot of time, so we're doing that analysis. In terms of the business model, again, I think I'll come back to the idea of not having this be a bolt-on. This is part of our business strategy, and it's integral, not just at the strategic level for the company, but being built into our brands. I mean, we run our company through our brands, and more the relevancy of consumers, of the customers like that we sell to, and the purpose behind our brands is really driving us to make it purely a business issue. Absolutely. And like I've never seen, I've been doing this 25 years at Colgate. So I have a lot of positive hope for the future, but lots of challenges ahead as well.
Wonderful. Florence, I'd love to give the last word to you. There is a question saying, as a global community, how do we ensure that companies that are setting up, how do we ensure that companies are setting bold ambitions and that they're actually working towards them? And maybe I would add to that, in knowing that you're so engaged in the UAE and across the Middle East, what do you see as the opportunity for companies to engage locally and really use that to drive SDG ambition?
Thank you, Olen. So I would say for me, this program is definitely an opportunity for companies to either start their journey or level up their internal targets. Are the benchmarks themselves ambitious? Yes, they are extremely ambitious. But as we were saying, it's a journey, and nobody is expected to reach, the target from one day to another. So, as Eric was saying, the idea is really to create a step-by-step path towards achieving the target. And I know that when we start, or for smaller company, maybe it's extremely challenging to know how and when to start and what type of material to use. And we definitely need the practical tools. And I think the partnership between Accenture and SAP on this program will definitely ensure that the practical tools are made available. Now, I mean, from a UAE local network perspective, we will be implementing this program as a platform for company to learn and to increase the adoption of the program. We are planning to run some workshops, events, share some tools with companies, create a mentorship program for the companies who are more advanced in their journey to support the companies which are less advanced. So really, I mean, my advice would be to encourage the companies to reach out to their local network, or if it's not possible, reach out to actors in their countries who are leading the change. And again, partnership is crucial, or to the UNGC, but really increase the level of engagement.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, perfect way to end. We indeed are launching today the SDG Business Benchmarks, the initial set of proposed benchmarks that's part of this initiative and partnership SDG Ambition. If you, as one of the companies in the Global Compact, if you're interested in joining this initiative to work with other companies on how to set more ambitious goals and targets and how to really deepen integration also into performance management, please go to the Global Compact website. There's a page on SDG Ambition. You can find out how to be part of this, and we'll launch recruitment for the initiative in just a couple of weeks. But I think this was a wonderful panel. I'd love to thank the panelists very, very much for sharing your leadership practices, for also sharing some of the challenges related to goal setting, both setting targets and delivering on them. So thank you to Anne, to Eric, to Florence, and to Vance, and to all of you who joined. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the 20 hours of the summit. Whenever you're not asleep, hopefully you check into some of the other sessions. There's another panel on SDG Ambition, a CEO panel. It's at 11 a.m. Central European time, so in something like 15 hours, there's another panel just before the closing. But thank you again to all for joining, and have a great rest of the day.